while your day is winding down. They're just getting started. This is South Coast Tonight with Chris McCarthy and Marcus Farrow. They've got you covered on all the news of the day, from local issues to politics on both sides of the aisle. This is the place where the movers and shakers come to be heard, to listen, and where they're held accountable. This is South Coast Tonight on WBSM.
Welcome back to South Coast Tonight. I'm Marcus Farrow.
And I'm Chris McCarthy.
Hey, we're going to be joined by Bristol County Sheriff Paul Heroux in just a little bit, but first we're joined by Ward 5 City Councilor Scott Lima. Hey, Scott.
Chris and Mark, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Well.
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
we can hear you great.
Great. Okay. I have you on speakerphone. It's a little easy to talk this way. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity.
We appreciate you reaching out and wanting to join us. And Scott, before we get started, I got to ask you. You pulled papers for at large. People have been calling in and asking us for a while what your intentions are with that. I know I had asked you before privately, but just wondering if you have any sort of public statement on that.
I don't have a public statement. I mean, if you give me a couple of minutes, I can give you some reasons why. I didn't expect to talk about this. I don't know if we're going to get to the housing, but if you give me a couple of minutes, just cut me off if you need to.
Sure.
So, first of all, let's be clear that a couple of things. One, I pulled papers. I haven't gotten one signature yet. But pulling papers is somewhat of an indication of interest. I think you did a good job of parsing my statement. I think it took a little while before people realized that when I said I would start running for Ward 5 City Councilor, that I wasn't closing the door for not running for any other office.
Sure.
So you parsed that statement, and I think that it was written intentionally the way that it was written.
Mm-hmm.
That was certainly no mistake. So I pulled papers. So will I definitely run for a councilor at large? I don't know. I have papers. I haven't gotten one signature yet. Why? So if we get to the why, since I've become a city councilor, I'm in my 6th year. So the second year of my 3rd term. My thought process and my interests have expanded way beyond Ward 5. They've expanded way beyond the ward.
Okay.
And I'll just give you for instance, I'm on the board of directors of the New Bedford Ocean Cluster, which we have 4 pillars that we're concerned with. So my interests have gone from strictly Ward 5. They've expanded. When you're on the Ocean Cluster, you're looking at everything on the waterfront. You're looking at everything from everything that takes place in wards, certainly in wards 3, 4, and 6, and not necessarily in Ward 2. Wards 1 and Wards 5 do not have any waterfront property. So real quickly, Ward 6, we're involved in aquaculture on the New Bedford Ocean Cluster. Clark's Cove, though we have the CSO problems with the combined sewer overflow, I'm interested in aquaculture, something I've been interested in a long time. So now my focus has shifted, not just from Ward 5, but what's going to happen in Clark's Cove? Mm-hmm. What's going to happen with aquaculture in the city? It's a great opportunity. Look at Ward 4. That's for harbor and offshore wind. So the offshore wind staging areas are down there. Everything to do with our fishing fleet is in Ward 4. If you start going over to Ward 3, you have fish processing. You have the new National Offshore Wind Institute is putting a facility there. And this is really a stretch, but I know that there was talks years ago of maybe bringing sculling, the sport of sculling, to New Bedford, which is something that could happen in the far north branch of the Acushnet River, which gets up toward Ward 2. So there may be some ward councils listening. I'm not trying to step on anyone's toes. If I were to run and if I were to win, I'd want to work with ward councils. But I just mentioned to you several things that happen along the waterfront in 4 different wards, and none of them are Ward 5. That's kind of the long story short.
So appreciate that, Scott. So going on,
and just one last thing also, parallel products. That's something that I'm not in favor of. That's in Ward 1. So if I were to run for councilor lodge and I were elected, I would stand with the people in Ward 1 against parallel products. So that kind of wraps that up, but that kind of gives you a flavor for my thinking and how things have changed since I've been elected.
So Scott, going on to the housing, the mayor released this comprehensive housing plan to address some of the housing crises that are going on. What are your general thoughts on it?
Sure. So in the past, you and I have, I think, differed a little bit on language, and that may be the same here. It's called a comprehensive housing plan. I see it as more of a roadmap. I think it's going to take a year or two before you can really come up with a comprehensive housing plan, and that would be born of projects that are going to be completed within a year or two, and other projects that could be coming online. If you look at the plan, which I call a roadmap, and first of all, I congratulate the mayor for putting together this plan, and I congratulate Councilor Burgo for bringing this to the forefront. He's taken a lot of heat, but you know what? He's really brought this to the forefront, and I don't know that we would have a plan that's reduced to writing at this point in time if it weren't for Councilor Burgo.
I think that's fair. I really think that's fair.
Yeah, I agree.
Raising this issue. So, when you look at the plan, like there's 5 pages that are devoted to the introduction. That's an introduction. I mean, we need empirical data. I'll give you an example. There is a 30-unit building in the city. I talked to a developer. He paid $100,000 per unit, and he thought he was paying a little bit up for it. That's $3 million in acquisition costs. If he were to put invest $75,000 per unit, I'm throwing that number out there, being inclusive of the common areas, right? Because you have to prorate that cost to the common areas.
Right.
You're all in for maybe $175,000 per unit, maybe $200,000 per unit. If you look at the plan, it says that rehab costs could be up to like $300,000 per unit. I don't know that that number is real. So, empirical data, when projects are done, particularly a project like this, where you're rehabbing an apartment building, an existing apartment building, I think the costs are going to be lower. Maybe not much lower, but lower. So, again, 5 pages of introduction, that's not a plan, that's an explanation. But there is some really good stuff in here. I think that what this framework also says, and I joked around with Josh Amro on this. Josh Amro has become the housing czar. We now have a housing czar in the city. His job, to me, has completely changed since he came into office in December. This forces him to become the housing czar. I joked about him with him that the other day. So it's good, but I really think that it's more of a framework than a plan. A plan, and I'll just use an example. As you probably know, I'm a huge fan of the Community Preservation Act. I've looked at the reporting that the Community Preservation Committee has done since the plan has been implemented, and you see how the reporting has changed and how it has matured, and the data that you can now pull from that really helps you plan for the future. 70% of the allocation, I believe, is going to go to Ward 4. I'm the Ward 5 councilor. I'd like to see more money go to Ward 5. But the fact of the matter is that most of the cultural institutions where a lot of money is going is in Ward 4.
Right.
And we should congratulate Ward 4 for getting that money. But it also shows you that very, very little money is coming to Ward 5. And not only is that happening through CPA, but because Ward 5 is in particular census tracts based on wealth and poverty, we can't get money for other projects because the money goes to parts of the city that are not quite as affluent. So as a Ward 5 councilor, I have to fight really hard to get any other money into Ward 5 because based on census tract information, we're not getting a ton of money. CPA, we're not getting a ton of money. But the empirical data that you see in the CPA report gives me that information, which then helps me fight for other money. So that's why, again, I call this more of a framework. I think you'll know down the road what a plan looks like. So 2 more seconds. I worked on my metaphors for this particular thing. I go to Horseneck Beach a lot. On some days, it's a beautiful beach. But you know what? When you go down to St. John and the Virgin Islands like I do, that's when you know you've seen a great beach.
That's beautiful.
So you know what you see when you see it. So I think that this is more of a road.
I'm not a big fan of the donkeys, but other than that, it's a beautiful beach.
So I think a year or 2 down the road, we'll be able to have something that's much more comprehensive.
Scott, what's your so you said you're a big fan, obviously you're a big fan of the CPA. You voted against that ballot question that came forward, and you're going to vote against that again, right, when it comes up next week?
Well, the thing is it's actually, so I think it's more correct to say that I'll vote to sustain the mayor's veto.
Okay.
That's voting against it, but I will vote to sustain the mayor's veto.
Where are you on the
I'm in support.
Where are you on the rent stabilization question?
I'll have an announcement on that next week. I'm 50-50.
Okay.
Well, that's fair.
That's fair.
This is what I'm saying is, before the vote comes up next Thursday, I will absolutely announce how I intend to vote. So you know how I'm voting on CPA. I'm going to vote to sustain the mayor's veto. I will announce probably on Monday how I plan to vote on the rent stabilization ballot question, and I'll have a press release with regard to the mayoral term.
Okay, interesting.
Super. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Scott, is there any I appreciate you coming on talking about the housing issue. Obviously, it's probably the most salient issue in the city for most people, and actually really in the Commonwealth. Is there anything else that we left out of the conversation that you'd like to include?
No, I think just bringing up the subject and talking about it is important. I don't think you've left anything out. I'm most of my reading on the plan has been toward the beginning of the plan, and not toward the home ownership part. But really, it's on the rent part. Folks that are going to be paying rent.
Sure.
That's the part of the plan that I've really studied. But I don't think there's anything you left out. But the
conversation will continue. Safe to say, right? The conversation will continue.
Absolutely.
Scott, thanks so much.
You didn't ask me what my favorite TV show is.
Oh, we didn't ask you. What is your favorite TV show?
Nice, to show you how nerdy I am. Prime Minister's Questions. Have you ever watched Prime Minister's Questions?
Of course I have. Of course I have.
That is my favorite.
Who was your favorite Prime Minister?
I don't know that I have a favorite. I like the current Prime Minister. I like him. I like him a lot.
He's squared away.
I love when he beats up Labor.
Yep.
I love when he beats up Labor, and he'll say something to the Labor about how they're with the thugs and how he is with the British people. I just absolutely love it.
Johnson wasn't bad either.
He wasn't. And I'll tell you,
he was humorous.
I watched his last speech, and his last speech, he said something very important. His closing words. And the first thing he said, now I'm going to give you my closing words, quote. And he said, first, stay with the American people. Well, so the question that was, if I have any advice for the next prime minister, this is what my advice would be. And then he said, quote, stick with the American people. That was the very first thing he said. And then he went on to, support Ukraine, and he said some other things. But the first thing he said was stick with the American people.
I like that.
Absolutely I love that.
That's great stuff. Thank you, Councilor Lima. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, I think this is Sheriff Heroux.
Hey, Marcus, how's it going?
Hey, you're here with Marcus and Chris. We appreciate you calling in. I know it's been kind of a busy day for you.
Really appreciate it, Sheriff. Thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I'm actually driving right now, so I left the house correction jail just probably about 10 minutes ago, so I'm just heading to go get some dinner.
So, I know you had a press conference, but for the people in the audience that weren't able to hear it on TV, for us, I wasn't able to be there. What are the details of the incident that you can tell us?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, there's a lot of moving parts. So I'll take you through it. I'll give you the story. We were in the process of moving inmates from one housing unit to another housing unit, and we're doing that for a lot of different housing units. Now, why did we want to move inmates from around housing units? The new admissions that we have coming in were being housed in single cells or double cells. And when you have new admissions, new admits, inmates, being in a single or a double, you don't have a lot of eyes. It's a risk for suicide. So we said, okay, we're going to move all of the inmates into the new admissions into GA. And, not GA, GC. Sorry, I was just distracted as I'm driving. We're moving inmates into GC. So that new admits are now in a dormitory-style setting. That's going to help reduce our suicide risk. This is one of the recommendations that we got from our Lindsay Hayes, our suicide expert. We were planning on doing it anyway. This is how it was done before COVID, just to be clear. We were going back to pre-COVID levels. So that was something that, would have made for a better situation. Now, in the process, we have to move inmates around. Now, at the same time, we also are looking at closing Ash Street. And one of the things we have to do to close that street is to retrofit some of the housing units. And those housing units just happen to be GA and GB, the two housing units that we had a problem with today. One much more of a problem than the other. So as we're moving inmates around to accommodate these several things that we're doing, there was in one of the housing units, GB, which housed 75 inmates at the time, 17 inmates became agitated. They got it in their mind that they didn't want to be moved to a different housing unit. So they didn't want to move to a different housing unit, so they said, no, we're not moving. So we cleared out, and we could tell they were getting agitated. Our security staff recognized what was going on. They moved the correctional staff out, and the inmates basically, at this point, there was no de-escalating them, even early on. They had heard rumors that we were, going to be reducing their rec time and reducing the amount of time they can talk to, for visits and stuff. And that's just not true. We were not going to be doing that. And we just, some rumors are endemic in politics, in corrections, and it's how it goes. So they became agitated. We pulled our security staff. There's 2 correctional officers on this housing unit. We pulled them out. We locked it down. They then trashed the unit, and we're talking maybe $100,000 to $200,000 worth of damage.
Okay.
So meanwhile, the housing unit over, the other one, GA, they had 63 inmates, and I apologize for the noise. I'm actually going over the Braga Bridge right now. So we had 63 inmates there. Now, they're able to communicate with each other, shouting at each other through the windows, out to the outside, and they could hear it. So they the inmates, these 63 inmates in GA started to get a little bit agitated as well. But they never rose to the level. They destroyed the center console that would control the opening and closing of doors. We locked that down, and then we left there as well, and they destroyed that. But that was the extent of the damage in that housing unit, so really not much. So, at this point, it's between 10 and 12 o'clock. We were trying to de-escalate the situation, talk to them. They gave us a written list of demands, which I then responded to all of the demands. I retyped up a response and, gave it to correctional staff. Staff brought it back over to them, and they didn't even read it. They just ripped it up and threw it back at us through the window. They were just, it was at a point of no return. It was just, they had it, they dug their heels in. So, we recognized that we had to.
Sheriff,
what were
some of the demands?
They wanted. It was a lot of stuff that was reasonable that I was going to do anyway. They wanted to try and lower the canteen prices and lower the phone call prices, stuff that we were looking at doing anyway. So, they wanted more programming, better vocational program, better reentry. And they wanted so all those things we were planning on doing.
Sheriff, did they put in there? We want to lower the recidivism rate at the Bristol County Sheriff's Office.
No, they didn't say that in those words, but they also wanted to have the very first demand was they wanted the phones restored immediately, and they said now. And that was one we were not going to accommodate because that's a security issue during a situation like this. We weren't going to, turn the tablets back on, let them communicate, with the outside world.
Okay.
Because that's when things, in fact, one correctional officer, and this was a problem, they're not supposed to do this. One correctional officer actually brought his cell phone into the unit. He was one of the COs that was pulled out. And, they gained control of the CO's cell phone. And that's a problem because then they start circulating rumors.
Oh.
They had they said this to the outside world that they had captured a correctional officer. Another rumor was that a CO or maybe it was an inmate got killed. None of that was true. Nobody got hurt. I mean, literally, it was the main objective was to de-escalate the situation. That didn't happen. But the next thing was to keep everyone safe. Correctional officers and the COs and the inmates. And that was accomplished. So we regained control of both housing units without anybody getting hurt. But some of the other demands that they had, like I said, it was like, we want TVs. So I typed back and gave to them, which they never even read my responses. But I said, look, you guys just destroyed your TVs. They had TVs on the walls in the housing unit. I said, so no, we're not going to give you, this is how you treat your stuff. I said, you'll get your tablets back when, we'll reactivate those. So, yeah, it was basically, it had to do, the trigger to this was, the going back to pre-COVID. It was actually returning inmates to the housing arrangements before COVID, where you had inmates, new admissions in the, dormitory style. And then we also, so we had to shuffle people around and then also start on the construction to, put toilets in cells and locks on doors. Now, something the public probably doesn't realize is we have capacity for 1,400 inmates, but we can only lock 700 inmates behind doors, actually less than 700 behind doors. We have half of our capacity doesn't have locks on doors because the cells don't have toilets in them. So if we had toilets in cells and locks on doors, this would have never happened. And Marcus, you and I have talked about this in the past. This is part of my plan. I've seen this as a problem. We have a way to address it. We were going to roll things out using canteen money. But in the process, though, hopefully the state will give us more money faster to put toilets in cells and locks on doors so this doesn't happen again. Because the problem was we had to respond to 75 inmates in one place and 63 in another. You have to have a lot of 100 COs, 100 security staff ready to respond to that many inmates. If it's, that's why we needed to call in Suffolk, Hamden, Norfolk, Barnstable, and Plymouth County. They all responded, as did the DOC. We had well over 100 SRT, special response team available to go.
Yeah, so that was actually my next question. We weren't sure if that I was there for a bit. There were fleets of vehicles coming in. We weren't sure if that was a proportional response or something that was just protocol. But what you're saying, it was for proportional response.
It had to be because we had 100 and we have like 60 plus 70. So we had 138 inmates. So we had the 5 and 3. So we had 138 inmates. If I did my math right in my head quickly, we had to deal with. You have to have more security than you do inmates to take back a housing unit, because otherwise, if it's 1-to-1, that and that one of those COs is overpowered, then you have to deal with 2-on-1 somewhere else.
Right.
So we had to make sure we had enough COs to outnumber the inmates if things went bad. Unfortunately, but for the property damage, things didn't go bad. Nobody was hurt. No COs were hurt. No inmates were hurt. We showed force, but we really didn't need to use force, and certainly there was no excessive force.
We're speaking with Sheriff Paul Heroux of Bristol County. Sheriff Heroux, you mentioned, though, that one of the guards, as I understand it, broke the rules, brought his cell phone into the cell block. It was taken away from him by the inmates. Was that a violent struggle? Did he give it up? What happened in that case?
No, actually, okay, we refer to them as correctional officers, to be clear, because they're not guarding, they're actually managing people. Just like we give them I always give them their shout out for being a correctional officer rather than a guard. But what happened was, after the correctional staff had left the housing unit, this phone was left behind in his lunchbox or something like that. Now, he wasn't supposed to, I'm not even sure if it's a he or she, I don't even know at this point, it's kind of incidental. They weren't supposed to bring it on the housing unit in the first place, but the lunchbox was gone through, they took the cell phone. Eventually we got the cell phone back, and, but there's a reason for everything. There's a policy and procedure for everything, and, keeping cell phones out of jails, these secure housing areas is one of those policies we have for a lot of good reasons.
So, Sheriff, someone called into the afternoon program, a Barry Richards show, and said that they were an inmate in one of the adjacent units. And so I had said to, just from my experience as a defense lawyer that, you have to go through that whole just process with Securus, and you'd have to put your credit card in and all of that. But I guess, was it possible if that was an actual inmate that called in from a cell phone?
It's possible it was. It actually, because it could have been.
Wow.
I mean, I doubt that's the case. They might have used that CO's phone if they somehow got into it. Now, I'm doubtful because, usually if it's an iPhone, you've got a 5-digit or a 6-digit, code you have to enter. So I'm doubtful that was a valid call. I mean, it's possible. It maybe happened, but I just don't know.
So we're speaking with Bristol County Sheriff Paul Heroux. We're talking about the incident that occurred earlier today. So there were, I had somebody tell me that there were 17 employees that were, 17 inmates that were moved to other jails. Is that correct?
There was 17 from one housing unit and 3 from another. The 17 inmates that were moved out of the first housing unit, the one that got trashed, those were the agitators. Those were the ringleaders that really fomented a lot of the disturbance. In the other housing unit, there were 3 inmates, and they were also agitators, and we also moved them to different county jails. We spread them out. And we house inmates from other counties that agitate in those places, too. And we do that because we recognize the potential for them to reignite a situation. They have a following. They have people they know. So we isolate them and put them in another jail. And like I said, it's mutual aid. We help out other jails. Just like if another jail had a situation tonight or tomorrow, we would send our SRT team, that come in with the full body armor to keep them safe. But we help each other out. That's what we do in corrections.
Oh, speaking with Sheriff Paul Heroux, the Bristol County Sheriff. Sheriff, among these 17, is there a common denominator among them? Do they have leadership in their paperwork? What got them going specifically? What gave them a leadership role here?
Well, all of the people in both housing units were all awaiting trial.
Okay. And
they were awaiting trial for all sorts of different charges. We did have some people in there who were awaiting trial on murder charges, so I let all the security staff know that in advance going into the housing unit. They had broken things apart and created contraband. So, there were some dangerous people in there.
Okay.
But the common denominator was the susceptibility of these 17 to get worked up over rumors. And, now they might have created the rumors and believed the rumors. But they were, no, that happens. I mean, some people just say something. Yeah, they'll say something, and because they heard it, they said it, well, it must be true, because they believe it. And so, like I said earlier in the program, some folks, the agitators were circulating, well, they're going to take away our rec time. They're going to take away our visitation, and, we go to these new housing units. None of that was true. One of the things about bringing them to the new housing unit that was true is this particular housing unit didn't have locks on doors because they don't have toilets and cells. And the housing unit we were bringing them to does have, and they are now behind cells that do have locks on doors and toilets in the cells. So that is a little bit more restrictive for them, but that's also the same condition that it is for everyone else, in jails and prisons all across the country. And that's something that we need to address, too. We need to make sure that all of our cells have toilets and all of our doors have locks to avoid situations like this, but also just more the everyday stuff. The everyday stuff is if you have cells that don't have locks on them, in the middle of the night, you can have rapes, and it does happen.
Right.
That's a concern for inmate safety. We have, inmates that could be assaulted in other ways in the middle of the night or any time of day. Sure. We have, the correctional officers who work there, when you have a housing unit that has, like today, 63 in one and 75 in another, you've got 2 correctional officers and you have no locks on doors. They could quickly take control of the situation and take a hostage. So it's just incredible that we don't have locks on doors. But like I'm repeating myself, we've been planning on putting locks on doors, pretty much the entire time I've been here. Like it was when I found out about this, it was one of the first things we started to address. It's just, with anything in government, it just takes time, and, we got to move people around. We can't do construction while inmates are there. So it's just this, there's a lot of moving pieces.
Sheriff Heroux, I have a question for you. If you want to take this opportunity to commend the job that your staff did, because as I understand what you're saying is none of your staff got seriously injured or maybe injured at all. None of the inmates got seriously injured. If you'd like to reflect a little bit on the execution of your staff.
Yeah, so the staff, all the different jails that came here, all the different sheriff's offices that sent them, Hamden, Suffolk, Norfolk, Plymouth, and Barnstable, as well as the DOC, they all worked really well together. They all have trained to the same standards. and, same minimum standards. We have, we all meet the same minimum standards. They went in together. They knew what to do. They took their job very seriously. They all listened when it came time to speak. They all listened. They're all professional. And, like I said, we showed force by showing up with probably well over 100 security staff. We showed that we were in there, but like I said, nobody got hurt. No COs got hurt. No, inmates got hurt. I mean, it was one inmate had a bloody eye, but he might have slipped. We don't know how that happened. He might have slipped and fallen. One of the things that the inmates did was they put soapy water all over the floor to make it difficult for when we were to go back in. Then we would not have quite the same footing. But what we did to counter that was maintenance staff. To give another shout out to staff, they were able to throw sand and salt all over the floors as soon as we got in there, and that made it so it's not as slippery. But the professionalism that the men and women showed, outstanding. The fact that nobody got hurt, inmates didn't get hurt. Really outstanding. I mean, they work well together. Professional. Never said, I don't want to do this, I'm scared. No. These guys, they all suited up. They knew exactly what they needed to do, and they went in. They put people in handcuffs. For the most part, nobody resisted. If there was any resistance, nobody got hurt in that resistance, to my knowledge. They're well-trained professionals. And unfortunately, and I'm not taking a jab at you, but somebody called them a guard earlier. Guards just watch people. Correctional officers manage people. There's a difference, and that's why I always make sure we call them correctional officers. A correctional officer is a trained professional, how to deal with situations like this, de-escalate situations, and we had multiple. I'll give a shout out to Colonel Oliver. Colonel Oliver was able to, along with a couple other folks, that was involved with this. They were able to really talk down the second housing unit, so that we didn't have to use we didn't have to throw flashbangs inside. We didn't have to use CS gas, inside to take it back. The first housing unit, that was necessary.
So, you use CS gas?
What's that?
You did use CS?
Oh yeah,
right.
that brought down their resistance.
Yes, it does.
Considerably. Yeah, it does. It made them a lot more. The CS gas is basically an irritant, and I was breathing it myself. My throat is still a little bit, a little bit, kind of scratchy from that. I only introduced myself to the situation after the housing unit had been taking control. Otherwise, I was away from the housing unit the entire time. Once they took back control of the housing unit, that's when I introduced myself. That's when I was inhaling the CS gas. But it was, but when the inmates were coming out, they were in their cuffs, and they were, they were clearly under the influence of the CS gas. We put all the correctional officers through it as well in the academy, just like the military does that.
Yep. The disco hut.
Yeah, when you're in boot camp.
Yeah, the disco hut.
So, Sheriff, I guess, you talked about the incident that happened at the ICE detention facility because the tapes had been released. You were critical of how the dogs were deployed. Were the dogs used this time at all?
No. In fact, the dogs were there for a moment. I said, let's get the dogs out of here. We don't need them here. The dogs...
you literally said who let the dogs out?
No, yeah, I said, let's get them out of here. I want the dogs out. Right. So I had to go and explain that. I actually, after the whole day was over, I went and talked to the K-9 unit. I said, look, nothing against you guys. I said, the dogs, we're not going to let the dogs bite anybody, number one. So, we don't want the dogs on the housing unit. So, and I didn't want the dogs outside of the housing unit in the courtyard where the cameras were seen, filming from the helicopters above. I think there were 2 helicopters at one point, but because I didn't want to give the optic of, well, what are the dogs there? So what do dogs do? Dogs bite. Well, maybe they're going to let the dogs bite. No, we weren't going to do that. So I want to use the dogs for detection of drugs and other contraband. We have noses for it. That's what we're using for. So the dogs were not there. They were there for maybe 5 minutes, and I said, nope, let's get them out. Just if they can be outside on the perimeter. I'm okay with that. But like outside of the on the outside of the chain link fences, outside. But I didn't want them anywhere near the housing units.
So,
Sheriff, just one more thing. I think we got to give your man Jonathan Darlin a real shout out here for communicating all the things that were going on at the jail today. I know Marcus agrees with me that Jonathan Darling really showed above and beyond.
Oh yeah, he was by my side pretty much the whole day, as was the superintendent. We had General Counsel Gretchen Bennett, Chief of Staff Owen Bebo. We had Makupu. The legislative liaisons, and the president came down. We worked really well as a team. At no point were any decisions ever made alone. Every decision that was made, we talked about it with multiple people, at least a half a dozen people in the room at any one time.
Sure.
Okay, what about this? We vetted the idea, and then we put it aside if it was a bad idea. One of the things, some folks might have said is, well, why didn't you just wait it out? Why did you have to use force at all? Why didn't you just wait for the inmates to eventually get hungry? Here's a couple of problems we had. One of the problems is that we had 4 diabetics in this housing unit. And those the inmates actually, when we approached them to give the insulin, they refused. They wouldn't take the insulin to give to the diabetics. That was one problem. Another problem is they started to make threats. I'm not sure if they were valid or not, or legitimate threats, but they started to say, if you don't, do such and so, and they never really made clear what it was, still not sure what it was, we're going to hurt people. So, and another problem, one of the other bigger issues, there's those immediate issues, but more globally is that when we had to shut down the entire jail, and when we shut down the entire jail, that means everybody else is locked up.
Yeah.
There's no programming going on. Now you're agitating everyone else. Now the tablets are also turned off. Now you're agitating all those other people. And like I said before, half of our inmates are not in locked cells. And so that was good. It could have spilled over to a lot more housing units having problems. So that's why just waiting it out really wasn't an option.
Sheriff, one more quick thing, because we got to take these breaks, and we appreciate you joining us. But before we let you go, people are going to want to know, I think some sort of formal report, right, that they can read and that they can look at. Is there going to be what did you call it, Chris?
An after-action review.
An after-action report.
Yeah, in fact, I said an after-action review is something we're going to do at some point next week, or actually maybe the week after, because Steve Souza, the superintendent, he's going to be away for some required training as part of his role. So he's, we'll probably do it the week after. We still have to have all the reports come in. We have to have the Special Investigation Unit do their review of the crime scene. This was basically a crime scene. And they have to go through and, document everything. So it'll be a couple weeks before that's done. Charges will be filed against some of the ringleaders, for, agitating for doing the destruction of government property. So that's not going to go well for them. And like I said, we tried to avoid, we didn't want to use force. We had to, reach the place. We wanted everybody to comply. Like I said, for the most part, they did. But there were some people who are in there on multiple charges, and this is just what they do. They're. So we have to go through those investigations.
I don't think you have to convince the audience, Sheriff.
Sheriff, we appreciate you joining us. We appreciate you joining us. I know it's been a busy day. Looking forward to talking with you more in the future.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Eventually, the videos will be made public. We just have to go through our regular investigation process, and we took videos of everything. It's all documented, and
Great.
Just like my predecessor Tom Hodgson said, we look forward to releasing the videos. We do as well.
Great, excellent.
Thanks a lot, Sheriff. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, good night, guys.
Got to take a break. Welcome back. Hey, Tim Weisberg's got a story on WBSM.com you should really check out. I think he did a really good job on that. While you read that, we're going to take a quick break. So go to WBSM.com, go to the WBSM app, and go check out the story that Tim Weisberg just wrote. We got to take a break.
1420 WBSM can now be heard on 99.5 F.
300.
They know the local issues from the inside out, and they call it like they see it. Chris McCarthy and Marcus Farrow are back with more South Coast Tonight on WBSM.
Hey, listen, we see you guys waiting patiently online. We're going to get to you in just a moment. We got to take one more quick break, and then we'll take your calls at 508-996-0500. Stay tuned.
Stick around.
All right, let's get back to the phones. Good evening.
Hello, you're on the air.
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen.
Hello.
I was just wondering if you have any information about the Bristol County Triad program.
I
heard it was being eliminated?
Yeah, that program I believe is being eliminated because I think that's I think what Sheriff Heroux said is it's a program that can be handled by local councils on aging.
Okay, so the Are You OK program is going away, and so is the GPS for seniors?
Yes, those are going away, yeah.
Those are going away. Well, the Are You OK program, I believe he said, because there's 135 people countywide, he said that there are programs throughout the county that can handle that. Like New Bedford Police Department has a similar program. He's hoping to transfer some of those calls, those functions to other programs so that he can reallocate the $1.5 million that those programs cost back into the jails.
With 135 people they call?
Yeah, it's 135.
It cost $1 million.
No, I'm just saying all those programs. Triad, Are You OK, Slam Tours, those are all the other extra programs.
So basically, prisoners are more important than seniors?
Yeah, I don't think that's
the core mission of the jail.
Yeah, that's the core mission of the jail is the inmates and running the jail. The seniors, caring for seniors is handled by like councils on aging and local police departments and other functions of government besides the county jails.
Or you could commit a crime and then he'll take care of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically 3 hot in a cot.
There you go.
Hey, I appreciate.
And my my favorite program was Beretta because it said don't do the time. Don't do the crime if you can't do the time.
Yet he didn't live by that, did he?
Thanks for the call, sir. We appreciate it.
Not. Yep,
Beretta
bye.
ended up in this can. Yeah.
We got to get back to the calls. Good evening. Hello.
Hey, Marcus, Chris, it's Bob McConnell calling.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
I'm well. I don't know if tonight is a good night for me to call you guys back after not calling for a long time.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure, go ahead.
You're an expert.
You got about 30. You got about 30 seconds.
Oh, boy, that figures, Marcus. Well, I was just going to say, Sheriff Heroux there reaffirming that point about guards and correction officers. I just wanted to talk about that for a second. I had gone out to MCI Shirley this week, and that kind of compels me to call tonight. But, if I could just read something real quick. We are not just a guard. We put our lives on the line every day. We fight, we counsel, we resolve serious conflicts on the fly. We are threatened every